Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel. So we have a ton of things to go over about the fourth stimulus check. You want to be sure to stay until the end of this video to find out more news about this. So lawmakers in Congress are currently worried about the millions of Americans that are still out of the workforce. Some lawmakers are actually debating on whether jobless Americans should receive a federal unemployment weekly boost again.
On another matter, President Biden spent much of the past week participating in a UN summit on the so-called Paris Climate Accords. The event was billed as a serious meeting of world leaders committed to taking action on climate policy. More than 1,000 VIPs arrived in a parade of no fewer than 400 private jets. 400 private jets. A mode of transportation that some climate activists say is up to 14 times more polluting than commercial aviation. Hypocrisy was on full display at that meeting. The topic of discussion was a bad deal that after 6 years has failed to hold any of the major signatories to their commitments on reducing emissions. But of course, that hadn't stopped President Biden from rejoining it. The president went as far as apologizing that the previous administration had let the U.S. reduce its emissions from outside the deal. He pledged that now the United States, quote, will do our part. Now, exactly what that means is not clear. The United States succeeded in cutting its emissions more from outside the Paris deal than any other major country managed from inside the deal. So President Biden apologized for outperforming the deal, and his counterparts welcomed America's new commitment to reduce U.S. emissions 50% by 2030 without a single specific on how to achieve it. Now, while America's emissions have fallen, the world's leading carbon emitter apparently has a free pass to keep on increasing its emissions until 2030. According to China's own representatives, their massive and thriving economy is still in a, quote, special development stage. Special development stage. We're talking about a country that built more than 3 times as much new power capacity as the rest of the world combined in 2020. Meanwhile, one outside analysis indicates that getting America even close to net zero emissions by 2050 would mean cutting our own GDP by nearly 12% annually. That's trillions of dollars shipped out of this country every year. Competitors like China.
Number of critical nominees for our national security and is going to be shamefully blocked. He's been a great fighter, not only for these men and women, but on foreign policy in general, one of the great leaders. And his passion for this issue comes from a desire to have us have the greatest strength abroad, diplomatically and geopolitically as well. So I can't thank him enough. And Mr. President, of all the mandates of the government, the most important is protecting the American people from threats, foreign or domestic. To do so, the President relies on an army of dedicated public servants, our expert ambassadors, diplomats, undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, who play a critical role in our government. But for months, some Senate Republicans have gone to great lengths to place pointless holds on over 100 of these nominees. The consequence, scores of empty desks in the State Department, in our embassies, in the Department of Treasury and other agencies. These nominees are not controversial. They're routinely confirmed by consent in this chamber until a few people decided that they wanted to make a big show of this for whatever reason. No one ever did this before. No one ever did this. Maybe one individual nominee here and there, but not all of the nominees, so risking the security of the United States. By this point in the Trump administration, for instance, both sides worked together to confirm 32 ambassadors by voice vote. Most of us didn't like the Trump administration or the people he's appointing, but we had enough integrity, enough faith in the future of this country and the strength of this country not to let politics enter into what had been routine decisions. Right now, Republican obstructionism has meant only 4 nominees have been agreed to. So, the bottom line is, let me be clear. Republicans who are holding up these nominees are endangering our national security. making it harder for our country to respond to threats at home and abroad. We hear a lot of talk about national security on the other side, but when it comes down to is they're preventing 32 State Department nominees and 10 Defense Department nominees for quick confirmation. That is wrong, and I would hope that they would think about it and let these fine people go through the way it has been done under Democratic and Republican administrations in the past. I thank my colleague from New Jersey once again for
exceeding expectations. Employment rose by an impressive 531,000 last month, and the unemployment rate edged downward to 4.6% alone. The growth in new jobs was widespread across a large number of sectors. Notable job gains were seen in a cross-section of industries, including leisure and hospitality, professional, and even business services. Now, the demand for hiring nearly doubled the number of job gains in September and easily exceeded Wall Street's forecast. Economists polled had predicted 450,000 new jobs would be created. In October, the number of long-term unemployed decreased by 357,000 to 2.3 million, but it is 1.2 million higher than in February 2020. Though payrolls have grown every month so far in 2021, the economy remains more than 4 million jobs short of its pre-crisis levels, following plunges in employment between March and April of 2020. So although the rate of jobs created is reassuring, the number of people who joined the workforce was disappointing, only rising by 104,000. This brings us to a labor participation rate of only around 61.6%. So there are various reasons why people are now returning to the job market and staying on the sidelines. So while the recent government data shows that over 10 million jobs are available, it doesn't mean that the roles sync up with the millions of people who are looking for a job. And we're now at a point in the crisis where employers are desperately hiring employees and not laying them off. Many who saw unemployment benefits are continuing to receive those benefits, rather than returning to work. Pennsylvania House of Representatives has passed legislation to ensure that people on unemployment can actively avoid employment. So, President Biden's climate and social spending bill is facing the threat of changes in the Senate, as Democrats navigate its slim majority and tricky budget rules. Even as House Democrats have spent days agonizing over trying to work out an agreement that could win over nearly all their members, ultimately punting it until at least mid-November, as moderates push for an analysis of the bill. Senate Democrats are warning that it is likely to change once it reaches their chamber. The bill faces prolonged challenges in the Senate, an even narrower majority, complex rules governing what can be in the legislation, and a chaotic process that lets Republicans try to peel off enough Democrats to inject changes into the legislation or sink it all together. Bernie Sanders vowed to go down to the wire, fighting for Medicare expansion and tax policies. Plus, the House and Democratic leadership have been trying to iron out the details of the bill before it passes the House and gets set across the Capitol. To smooth this path, asked President Biden and assure nervous moderates